This simple method preserves shelled nuts in the freezer. Most likely this will be for long-term storage, so don't forget to write the date and the source. Thanks to its famously strong shell, unshucked hickory nuts can stay viable for years. But once the nut meat is exposed to air, its flavorful oils will start to turn. When properly stored, the loss is negligible. On the other hand, off odors and texture-damaging ice crystals can degrade the nuts, but this can be remedied by removing and pumping the air and moisture out of the bag with this simple product. Avoid using previously used bags. They can carry hidden unwanted flavors that intensify during storage. For optimum protection, place in a second bag before putting in the freezer. These nuts are precious, so here are some tips for optimum use. A light toast will revive the nuts for long-term cold storage. Temperatures are so important. Make sure the nuts are brought up to room temperature before you roast them. A couple of drops of oil and a couple pinches of salt will bring out their nuttiness. This works out to about 1/4 teaspoon of oil and salt each for 2 cups of nuts. And then toss them through thoroughly to coat. To avoid losing any nuts, make sure your oven is completely preheated to 350. And use a very high quality cookie sheet, ideally one with a silicone liner, because this will help the nuts to toast evenly. When the nuts are done, they will have acquired a light golden interior and become fragrant. It will take between 8 to 12 minutes. So put the nuts in the middle rack and keep an eye on them. I'm constantly amazed and inspired by how much flavor a single hickory nut possesses. And given how rare they are, this is probably a very good thing. So a simple wheat cracker or a butter cookie dough really makes a perfect complementary medium. For this sweet version, this brown sugar shortbread, I sprinkle the uncooked dough with some sea salt flakes, and then I press in just one lightly roasted nut, and it's perfect. Follow the same method for unbaked cracker dough. Simpler yet, turn an already baked cracker into a delicious canapé by anchoring the nut with a bit of fresh herbed chev. Hickory nuts make a perfect complement to hard-aged cow's milk cheeses, as do full-flavored sheep's milk cheeses. To compose this plate, I'm using 2 uniquely Wisconsin cheeses, Pleasant Ridge Reserve and a bandaged cheddar from Blue Mont Dairy. The wild origins of these nuts make them a perfect messenger of place, like the cheeses distilled from lush grasses that grow in the same region. I'm adding some sweet pickled wild crab apples to build a dynamic constellation of flavors. Sweet and salty make a great synergy, while the acidity of the pickling juice will bring out the minerality in the cheese. Finally, some fresh tart apple to clear the palate for the next delicious bite. I encourage you to find similar matches with fine cheeses from the region where your nuts were gathered. This salad comes together in 2 stages. I individually plate the greens so that I can carefully portion the other ingredients so they're evenly distributed. If it was all tossed together, the beets would stain the cheese, and someone might not get their full share of the hickory nuts. You can use a mild crumbled feta in this salad or a salty, crumbly Italian sheep's milk cheese. I'm just crumbling this as I go. The roasted beets go on top, where we can enjoy their shapes and colors. And I'm finishing with a sprig of nutty watercress. And now it's time for a scattering of the whole toasted hickory nuts and a couple violets from the kitchen garden. This is going to taste delicious. This recipe for trout baked in parchment envelope is as delicious as it is simple. In this combination, hickory nuts show a natural affinity for the nutty sweet flavor of freshwater trout. The trout will be baked in an envelope hand-folded with baking-grade parchment paper. Make sure you're using parchment paper, which is sold in supermarkets. It's not the same thing as waxed paper, which will melt paraffin onto the food. Pull out enough parchment to make a square with the width, anywhere around 12 inches by 12 inches. Brush a little oil on one side of the square. This is where the trout will go. We'll season the underneath with some salt and pepper and a scatter of chopped hickory nuts. I position the fillet skin side down and repeat with seasoning the top side. I will add an extra little drizzle of oil. This will combine with the herb and trout juices to become a light sauce. I'm using a local cold-pressed sunflower oil for this. A light nut oil would also be delicious, as would olive oil. Since we have a lovely kitchen garden out back, I'm going to use chives in a medley of other fresh herbs. This is the point you can also add some very thinly sliced vegetables, like carrot or fennel. Don't forget some crushed nuts, then whole herbs like chervil, lovage, or tarragon, and some whole pre-roasted nuts to finish. Now it's time to wrap the parchment into an envelope. Fold the loose flap of the parchment over the trout to make a book. Starting at the spine, turn an inch of the edge in towards the center and give it a good crease. Start the next fold over the preceding one, turn it in, and make another good crease. Continue folding and overlapping the creases until you get to the other end of the spine. Now you have a half-moon envelope. The trout can be prepped up to this point and refrigerated until closer to mealtime. This is the perfect party dish because they only take about 15 minutes to bake and are ready to eat in a neat package that will hold the temperature and the seasoning. This trout is baked for 15 minutes at 375 degrees. I check for doneness by cutting a vent hole and inserting the metal tip of the knife into the thickest part of the trout to see if the flesh is turned opaque. If still in doubt, you can place the tip of your tool on a sensitive part of your skin to feel how warm it is. When you've established if it's done, you can cut away the top flap. I do highly recommend that you keep the trout in its lovely envelope because it also serves as a strategic purpose of holding the sauce in the warmth, and the envelope transfers so easily onto a plate. You can garnish with a bit more fresh herbs if you like. And remember, even if the trout is slightly overcooked, this presentation method is very forgiving. Bon appetit!